and I will end you!
The first thing Emily Grace felt was pain. Her scalp burned as Jack Turner's fist twisted into her hair and slammed her face into the packed dirt. Dust exploded around her, filling her throat, choking her lungs, grinding into her teeth. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her chest, dying as a muffled sob. The world tilted sideways, the sky a harsh, cloudless blue that mocked her suffering. At 22, Emily should have been at the height of her youth, like a rose in full bloom. But her beauty was no blessing. It was a curse. Men's leers followed her everywhere, and now it had become the excuse for her stepfather's cruelty. Jack Turner was a man hollowed out by whiskey and cards, a creature more beast than human. His breath reeked of rot-gut liquor, his shirt stank of sour sweat, and his eyes glowed bloodshot with sleepless nights spent gambling away everything her mother had left behind. The farm was gone, the money gone, and the last thing he had to barter was Emily herself. That noon, the Wild West sun bore down like the furnace of hell. 3 men sat waiting outside the shack that barely passed for a home. Debt collectors, rough, unshaven, their knives gleaming as they scraped dirt from under their fingernails. Their horses stood restless, stamping hooves in the dirt, as though they too smelled the violence in the air. Jack dragged Emily into the yard, his grip iron around her arm. She stumbled in the brightness, the heat blinding her, and saw the men grin when they laid eyes on her. His voice cracked like a whip. "Serve them," Jack snarled. The words fell like a death sentence. Emily froze, her blood turning to ice. She couldn't believe it. Not even Jack could sink this low. But the sneer on his face told her it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Her stomach twisted. Tears stung her eyes, but she shook her head violently, her blonde hair whipping in the wind. Her voice cracked, thin but defiant. "No, I won't!" The debt collectors burst into cruel laughter. The river, the men following lazily, spitting curses and laughing. The sun seared her pale skin, each bruise a badge of humiliation. "Please," she whispered through trembling lips. "Please, Father." Jack's teeth clenched, his jaw twitching with hatred. The plea didn't soften him. It fanned the flames. With a grunt, he lifted her as though she were nothing but kindling, then threw her into the current. The river swallowed her whole. Cold, crushing water filled her lungs. She clawed at the surface, panic pounding in her chest. Her dress tangled around her legs like chains. She kicked, thrashed, but her strength slipped away in the swirling current. Above her, muffled through the water, came the distorted laughter of the men on the bank. Her heart thundered, then slowed, each beat heavier, weaker. Black spots bloomed at the edges of her vision. Her mind screamed that this was the end. This was how her life would be spent, snuffed out as payment for another man's sins. Her last thought was bitter, betrayed by blood. And then, a shadow moved at the edge of the riverbank. Hooves struck earth. Boots thundered. A man dove into the water without hesitation. His arms cut through the current, reaching her just as her hands slipped beneath the surface for the last time. His grip seized her wrist, rough and sure. Emily's body was limp, but her eyes fluttered open, faint sparks of life refusing to die. He dragged her ashore, laying her gently on the grass. She coughed, choking, water gushing from her mouth as her lungs fought to breathe again. Her skin was ghost pale, her lips trembling as though words were trapped but too fragile to escape. The man stared down at her, stunned by the violence etched across her body. Bruises, cuts, torn fabric. His jaw tightened, his weathered face shadowed with fury and sorrow. It was Thomas Carter, a rancher in his 50s, strong as The Carter Ranch stood like an old fortress against the prairie winds, its timber walls scarred by storms and years. Thomas Carter carried Emily through the doorway, her body limp, clothes soaked and torn, skin cold from the river. Inside, the smell of smoke and pine welcomed them. He laid her on a bed near the fire, flames casting a flickering glow over her bruised face. Pulling a wool blanket tight around her, he waited, but her body still shook uncontrollably. Her lips parted, trying to speak, but only a faint rasp came out. Thomas crouched, eyes narrowed. He had seen dying men before, but never the cruelty of a young woman beaten near to death by her own kin. He fetched an old shirt from a trunk, worn soft from years of use. Holding it out, he said, "You need this more than I do." Emily hesitated. Every man she had known had brought pain. But Thomas's voice carried no demand, only calm patience. Slowly, she pulled it over herself. The shirt hung loose, nearly swallowing her frame. Yet as it touched her skin, she felt something long forgotten. Safety, however fragile. She clutched the fabric close. Silence stretched, broken only by firewood crackling. Thomas sat nearby, waiting. He asked nothing. He knew words came when they were ready. At last, Emily's gaze fixed on the flames, her voice no louder than a whisper. "This isn't the first time. For years. He's beaten me." Thomas's fists clenched on his knees, but he stayed silent, listening. "Today was worse," she continued, wiping tears with the sleeve of his shirt. "He wanted me to serve his debt. I refused. That's when he threw me into the river." Her voice cracked with shame. Thomas's jaw hardened. Jack Turner wasn't just weak. He was a monster. Emily shook as more words spilled out. "Sometimes I thought maybe I deserved it. Maybe I was cursed." Her eyes lifted to his. "But when you pulled me from the water, I thought maybe God hadn't forgotten me yet." "She's not yours anymore, Jack." Jack laughed harshly. "She's mine. Always will be." From inside, Emily's voice wavered but carried strength. "No, not anymore." Thomas folded his arms. "Leave now, before I lose my patience." For a moment, Jack looked ready to attack, but even drunk, he knew Thomas was no easy prey. Spitting in the dirt, he cursed and rode off. Thomas turned back inside, his face grim. "This isn't over. He'll be back, and next time he won't be alone." Emily's hands twisted in her sleeves. "What do we do?" Thomas thought a long moment. "There's one man who can help. Sheriff Hawkins." By sundown, Thomas rode into town. Hawkins's office sat at the end of Main Street, solid brick, worn but sturdy. The sheriff listened as Thomas told everything. The years of abuse, the debts, the river. When he finished, Hawkins's eyes hardened. "She'll be under the law's protection. If Jack dares show his face, he'll answer for it." Thomas returned with hope flickering. But he knew Jack Turner wouldn't quit. Men like him never did. That night, stars glimmered cold above the ranch. Emily sat near the fire, clutching her cooling tea. Thomas paced, restless, the weight of coming trouble heavy in his gut. Then it came. Hooves thundered outside. Dogs barked wildly. Emily dropped her cup, shattering it on the floor. Thomas grabbed his rifle and strode to the porch. Torches burned in the yard, revealing nearly a dozen men. At their head, Jack Turner, grinning like the devil, beside a scarred creditor clutching a knife. Jack bellowed, "Bring her out!" Thomas planted his boots on the steps, rifle raised. "You're not taking her anywhere." The scarred man sneered. "One old rancher against all of us? You don't stand a chance." The mob roared and charged forward. Thomas fired into the air, the blast echoing across the valley. The night exploded into chaos. Torches flared across the Carter ranch yard, casting jagged shadows over the grass. The mob of men surged forward, boots pounding, knives and pistols flashing in the firelight. At their head, Jack Turner bared his yellowed teeth in a grin, reveling in the storm he had unleashed. On the porch, Thomas Carter stood his ground. His rifle cracked once more, the sound rolling through the valley like thunder. A man stumbled back, clutching his arm, but the rest pressed harder, their hunger for violence stronger than their fear. Inside the cabin, Emily clutched the frame of the window, her knuckles white. The fire behind her flickered, throwing her shadow across the walls. Every crash outside, every shouted curse made her heart slam against her ribs. She wanted to hide, to vanish, but Thomas was out there alone. "Stay back!" Thomas roared, swinging his rifle like a club. The butt connected with the thug's jaw, sending him sprawling. Another lunged with a knife, catching Thomas's sleeve. The blade sliced through cloth, grazing skin. Thomas grunted, then drove his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking him off the steps. Jack laughed, drunk on fury. "That all you got, old man?" Thomas turned his gaze toward him, eyes hard as iron. "That's enough to put you in the ground." The men circled, snarling. One snatched a torch and hurled it at the porch. It struck the railing, flames licking the wood. Thomas stomped it out with his boot, sweat beading on his brow. The odds were too high. He could fight, but he couldn't win, not alone. Behind him, a scream. Emily had been dragged from the doorway by two of the thugs, who slipped past while Thomas fought. She kicked and clawed like a wildcat, nails raking skin, but one man slapped her hard across the face. The sound cracked through the night like a whip. "Let her go!" Thomas bellowed, breaking free from his attackers. He lunged toward her, but three men leapt onto his back, forcing him, glancing around nervously. Then came the shout. "Sheriff Hawkins!" Drop your weapons. Lanterns bobbed through the dark as mounted riders surrounded the ranch. The sheriff rode at the front, pistol raised, his deputies spreading wide with rifles aimed steady. Torchlight gleamed off their badges. The tables had turned. Thomas sucked in a ragged breath, relief mixing with dread. Hawkins had come, but was it in time? The men holding him released their grip, fear crawling into their eyes. A few dropped weapons outright. The scar-faced creditor backed away, though his knife still trembled near Emily's throat. But Jack Turner did not yield. His face twisted, spit flying as he screamed, "Nobody moves! She comes with me or she dies!" He seized Emily by the arm, yanking her against him. His other hand drew a dagger from his belt, pressing it to her throat until a thin line of blood marked her pale skin. Emily cried out, the cold steel biting. "Jack!" Thomas roared, forcing himself to his knees. "Let her go!" Jack snarled, dragging her backward toward his horse. "Stay back, all of you. I'll gut her where she stands." The sheriff's pistol stayed steady, but his jaw tightened. One wrong shot and Emily would fall. "Easy now, Jack. Don't make this worse." Jack's eyes blazed with madness. "It's already worse. She's all I have left, and I'll kill anyone who tries to take her." Emily trembled, breath shallow. But inside something sparked. She wasn't the same girl who had been tossed into a river to die. Thomas's kindness, his words, his belief in her worth, they burned inside her now. Jack's grip shifted slightly as he tried to mount his horse with her in tow. Emily felt the dagger ease just a fraction. Her gaze darted to Thomas. Their eyes locked, a silent understanding passing between them. Thomas gave the slightest nod. With a desperate cry, Emily drove her elbow into Jack's ribs. He grunted. The shot cracked like thunder. For an instant, the world froze, torchlight, steel, and fear suspended in midair. The bullet sliced the night, striking sparks as it grazed the blade in Jack Turner's hand. The knife spun from his grip, clattering against the dirt. Emily staggered back, gasping, a thin line of blood marking her throat. Thomas Carter lunged, tackling Jack to the ground. They hit hard, fists and boots churning up dust. Jack clawed like a rabid dog, his nails tearing at Thomas's face. Thomas answered with a brutal punch that split Jack's lip, but the man fought with the strength of madness. "Kill him!" Jack howled, spitting blood. His gang wavered, rifles half raised, but the sheriff's deputies stood ready, muzzles gleaming in torchlight. One wrong move would mean their deaths. Sheriff Hawkins barked, "Drop your weapons! Now!" Several men obeyed, their courage crumbling under the weight of the law. A few slipped into the darkness, abandoning Jack to his fury. But the scar-faced creditor held fast, his knife flashing. He lunged toward Emily, hunger and hatred in his eyes. Emily froze, her feet tangled in her torn dress. The scarred man closed the distance, dagger raised. Thomas saw him coming, but Jack locked his arms around him, holding him down. Jack's laughter rang in his ear. "You can't save her, Carter. She's mine." Emily's scream split the air. The knife arced down. Instinct roared through her veins. She dropped low, the blade slicing only her hair, and snatched up the fallen torch. With a desperate cry, she thrust it forward. Flames licked across the creditor's sleeve. He cursed, flailing, dropping the knife as fire ate his coat. Deputies swarmed, slamming him to the ground. Emily stumbled back, chest heaving, the torch still clutched in her hand. For the first time, she had fought back and won. Thomas tore free from Jack's grip, ramming his knee into the man's ribs. Jack wheezed but still laughed, a ghastly sound. "You think this ends here?" His voice cracked like broken glass. "I'll never stop. I'll haunt her till her throat. I'll live." Thomas nodded once. Relief swept through him, but so did a deeper unease. Men like Jack Turner didn't stop, even in chains. As if to prove the thought, Jack threw back his head and laughed. The sound echoed across the ranch yard, hollow and mad. "You can tie me, lock me, drag me to hell, but she'll never be free. I'll come back." One way or another, Hawkins struck him across the jaw with the butt of his pistol. "Shut your mouth." Jack sagged in his bonds, but the grin lingered. The sheriff ordered his men to haul Jack to town. The mob's remnants had fled, but the danger clung to the night air like smoke after gunfire. Thomas stood with Emily, watching the horses vanish into the darkness. Her body shook, not from cold, but from everything she had endured. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. She leaned into it, too weary to resist. "You're safe now," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't sure he believed them. Back inside, the fire smoldered low. Emily sat wrapped in a blanket, her eyes glassy. Thomas poured her water, but her hands trembled too hard to lift the cup. He guided it to her lips. She drank, then whispered, "He won't stop, will he?" Thomas stared into the flames. Shadows danced across his scarred face. "No. Not unless the earth takes him first." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the prairie was quiet. The mob gone, but fear lingered. Emily's voice broke it. "Then what do we do?" Thomas looked at her. At the bruises, the cut at her throat, the fire in her eyes that refused to die. He knew the answer, though it chilled him. "We fight. Until he can't come back." The wind howled across the plains, rattling the windows. Emily pulled the blanket tighter, yet her eyes. The prairie lay still under a cold moon. Yet in Emily Grace's chest, no stillness remained. Every breath felt like stolen time. Jack Turner's laughter still clung to her ears, haunting, a promise of vengeance even in chains. Inside the ranch house, silence weighed heavy. Emily sat near the fire, wrapped in Thomas's blanket, staring at the embers. Her hands still trembled. The cut at her throat burned with every swallow, a reminder of how close the knife had come. Thomas paced the wooden floorboards. The sheriff had hauled Jack to town hours ago, but Thomas knew chains couldn't hold a man like that forever. Jack wasn't just desperate, he was consumed. At last, Thomas stopped, his rough hand pressing the mantel. "He'll come back," he muttered. Emily lifted her eyes. "Then what happens to me?" Thomas met her gaze. He saw the fear, but he also saw the stubborn spark she'd found in herself. He drew in a breath. Then we stand and fight. The fire look it for jacked as well as worst. The fire look it from jack to rest. The fire look it for jacked as well as worst in the country. That lizard look to the worlest. That lizard look to the chains. That lizard look to the back and the mother has prassing with Emily. The fire look it for jacked as well as worst to the chains. The fire look it for jacked as well as worst to the chains. That lizard look to the chains. That lizard look to the country to the mother his pressing with Emily. Today we have somewhere. The fire look it for jacked as well as worst to the chains. Emily fire popped. Outside coyotes howled in the distance, their cries twisting in the wind like omens. By dawn the horizon glowed red. Thomas saddled his horse. I'll ride to town. Hawkins will need men ready if Turner breaks free. Emily touched his arm. Please, don't leave me here alone. He hesitated. The truth was, he didn't want to. But he squeezed her hand gently. I'll come back. Trust me. She watched him ride away, dust trailing behind. Alone, the cabin felt too quiet. Every creak of the timbers a whisper of danger. Emily gripped the rifle Thomas had left her. She had never fired a gun in her life, but now it felt like the only thing tethering her to survival. Hours dragged like years, then dirt. One of Jack's men toppled from his horse. Another fled into the brush. But Jack didn't run. He lunged toward the cabin, bellowing Emily's name. Thomas charged, colliding with him before he reached the door. They slammed into the ground, fists flying. Jack's blade flashed once more, catching moonlight. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, rifle clutched tight. The world blurred. Thomas grappling with Jack, Hawkins shouting orders, hooves and gunfire pounding the night. Then Jack broke free, the knife arcing downward toward Thomas's chest. "Thomas!" Emily screamed. Time shattered into pieces. Emily raised the rifle. Her breath came ragged, her vision blurred by tears. Her finger found the trigger. Jack's eyes flicked toward her, wild and unafraid. He laughed even as she aimed at him, as though convinced she could never do it. The rifle thundered. The blast echoed across the prairie, rolling through the night like judgment itself. When the smoke cleared, Jack staggered, his grin faltering for the first time. Blood bloomed across his shirt. He swayed, knife slipping from his hand. His eyes locked on Emily's, not with rage now, but disbelief. "You," he rasped. His body crumpled into the dust. Silence fell. Even the coyotes hushed. Emily's hands shook so violently she dropped the rifle. She collapsed to her knees, sobs tearing through her chest. Thomas scrambled up, bloodied but alive. He caught her in his arms, holding her as she trembled. "It's over," he whispered, though his own voice shook. Hawkins stepped forward, grim but resolute. "The law will see this for what it is, self-defense, justice." Emily clung to Thomas, but her eyes stared past him, fixed on Jack's lifeless body. The man who had stolen her childhood, her safety, her peace, lay broken at last. Yet victory carried no triumph, only exhaustion, sorrow, and the faintest flicker of freedom. The fire from the torches smoldered low. Smoke curled into the night sky,